All right, welcome everyone. Um, I'm thrilled to see so many people here. This is wonderful. And to have this opportunity today to talk about otters. So I'm Tim Bonebrake. You can call me Tim, Professor Bonebrake. I prefer Tim, but whatever your preference. Um, yeah, we'll start off. I have my own title slide, which is another otter photo. I hope you're here for otter photos because I have a number of them. But yeah, I do want to talk kind of more broadly about urbanization and conservation. So that's kind of the context of the talk. But I'm going to go through this story in 4 short chapters. So first, why otters? The second is finding otters. So this is the chapter with all of the otter photos and videos. So stay tuned for this one. Once I finish that off, then I'll talk actually about some of the research. So after we found otters and we collected all this data, what did we learn? And then I want to kind of end with some speculation about the future of Hong Kong otters. So first of all, why otters? You all, I don't have to tell anyone here, we live in this amazing city that's surrounded by biodiversity. But when you talk to people, a lot of people don't know about that biodiversity. And often when I tell people that I'm studying otters, I get a puzzled look. What otters? We have otters in Hong Kong? And the answer is yes, we do. And it's amazing. So this kind of biodiversity we have in Hong Kong is, I think, underappreciated. And so one of the things that my group is trying to do is learn more about that and figure out how to conserve that biodiversity. And it's the urban biodiversity that I'm actually particularly drawn to. This is a Graphium sarpedon butterfly. I took this photo in the IFC Mall. And one of the first things that I noticed when I first visited Hong Kong over a decade ago was the incredible diversity of butterflies just in the middle of the city, right? So we have approximately 250 butterfly species in Hong Kong, which is pretty incredible when you contrast that with the entirety of the UK, which has about 50 butterfly species, right? So we have this incredible biodiversity here. So how did I come to study otters? I've already shown you my preference, and I know many of you know that I'm really a butterfly biologist that pretends to study other things. This is Emily and Feng. They're around here somewhere. Follow us on Danaid HK. You might know about our butterfly stickering program, where we're tracking the migration of butterflies. But I'm particularly drawn to butterflies because they're a convenient system for studying environmental change. They're very sensitive to climate. We can get a lot of data on butterflies very quickly because we can go out and catch thousands of Danaids and then follow them and look at population estimates and do these amazing things. So that's why I like butterflies. But I'm actually not really a butterfly biologist necessarily. I'm really a conservation biologist. So I'm interested in how to conserve biodiversity more broadly. And so as a consequence, once I moved to Hong Kong, my group started studying turtles and snakes and trees and pangolins and all these other things. So actually now only about a third of my group is working on butterflies. But I still haven't answered the question as to why specifically I came to studying otters. And this really came about thanks to Billy, who's in the back of the room. Billy was supervising a particularly motivated master's student named Sean McMillan. Sean's the one in the hat. And as part of Sean's master's research, looking at the mammals of Hong Kong, she became particularly interested in Eurasian otter, and she decided she wanted to do a PhD and learn more about it. Sean has a very interesting background because she worked as an environmental consultant. And so one of the things that motivated her was she wanted more information about the biodiversity of Hong Kong and for things like otters, so that when development and conservation planning is required, we actually had the data to do something about that. So that's what motivated Sean to do a PhD. So Sean and Billy came to me and said, do you want to participate in this project on otters? And I said, well, sure, sounds like fun. So that's basically how it started. And then I said, well, but we don't really have any funding, so I don't know how this is going to work. And Billy said, no problem. And we very quickly got some funding. So all of this research I'm going to show is supported by Environment Conservation Fund, which is a government grant, Ocean Park Conservation, which also supported the project, and Wildlife Reserve Singapore. So that funding was really important. And with Sean and Billy, we decided to start the research on otters. So I'm going to show you a ton of otter photos and videos, and I'm going to do my best to credit Sean. But all of the stuff I'm talking about today, it's all Sean. I'm just pretending to be an otter expert when Sean is the real expert. Sean is now a project manager at the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust in the UK. And she finished her PhD in 2021. All right, so this was 9 years ago, which is kind of shocking to me. One of the real joys of putting this talk together is synthesizing what I didn't even realize until I started this, is almost a decade of research on this species. But at the time, in 2016, we knew very little about the status of otters in Hong Kong. This is a quote from a study in 1998. And I'll just read the quote. The Hong Kong status of the Eurasian otter was referred to as being very rare or extinct by Hill and Phillips in 1981, possibly extinct in 1993 and 1998. However, Eurasian otters have been sighted and footprints spotted irregularly in Maipo Nature Reserve over the last 8 years. In April 1996, one male Eurasian otter was run over by a car in the reserve. So that's about all we knew. And so as someone who prides himself on data and can go out and tag 100 butterflies in a day, this worried me, right? I wasn't sure we were able to even be able to find them, given how little we knew about Eurasian otter. The otter species we have here in Hong Kong is the Eurasian otter, or Lutra lutra. The species is near threatened globally. It has a huge distribution. So the same species of otter, Eurasian otter, we have in the UK and Europe, it's the same one we have here in Hong Kong. This is a study that was on the otters of China, and I'm going to read the quote. The low number of confirmed records for 2006 to 2016 suggests that all 3 otter species are on the verge of extinction in China. That includes the Eurasian otter. So this is really concerning. We don't see much evidence of this species in Hong Kong. You look at records across China, and even across China, it appears that the species is quite vulnerable to extinction. So there's definitely a need, even though it's a very broadly distributed species, and even though it's globally near threatened, here in China and in Hong Kong, they're certainly vulnerable to extinction. They're not the same species as the otters in Singapore. That's the second question I get if when I tell people I study otters in Hong Kong. They say, oh, the ones in Singapore, they're so cute. And they are very cute, but it's a totally different species. So the species in Singapore, if you've seen them or seen videos or photos, that's the smooth-coated otter, or which is vulnerable globally, has a smaller distribution. But the key thing about the smooth-coated otters is they form large vocal family groups. They're very social. So they're these cute little social otters, and you can see them playing around in Singapore, and everyone loves them. But the poor Eurasian otter, it's not very showboaty, right? They're very solitary, they're very territorial, they're very elusive, so it's hard to see them. So in fact, in the entirety of Sean's, she hates it when I say this, tell people this, but in the entirety of Sean's PhD research, she never saw an otter in person, which is very sad. And she hates it when I say that, but it's true, and it really emphasizes the rarity of these species and the fact that they really don't want to be around people. They avoid people a lot. If we look at historical records of otters in Hong Kong, this is from a recent synthesis paper on the records, you can see some interesting things. So the red and the orange dots, those are all pre-1962 records. And you can see prior to 1962, there are records all over Hong Kong. You can find them in Central pre-1933, which is pretty incredible. And you see from some of the old historical records, people would say, oh, I saw a Eurasian otter running across the beach in the middle of the day. So historically, things were very different. But post-1962, you can see all the green dots, all the recent records of otters in Hong Kong are in the Deep Bay area. So they now have this restricted distribution near Maipo. Okay, so that's for some context. That's how I came to start studying otters, thanks to Sean. So then it comes to the question of how to find otters. And Sean had a very ambitious plan. So basically her plan was to go out and do as much camera trapping as possible in the Deep Bay area to try to find photographic evidence of otters. And her second plan was to find spraints. Does anyone know what a spraint is? You know what a spraint is. You know what a spraint is. A spraint is otter poop. But it's very specifically when otters are trying to assert their territoriality, they'll find a conspicuous place and they'll poop at the conspicuous place to communicate to other otters, look, I'm here, so leave me alone, right? That turns out to be convenient because if we're trying to find spraints, we can kind of figure out where we might be able to find them if we find the right prominent places where otters might lay their spraints. So Sean's plan was to do a ton of field work, put out as many camera traps as possible, find as many spraints as she could, and learn everything we possibly could about otters. So I'm going to show you the first of the camera trap images. These are all people. Here's Tom. Tom's here. There's Eugene. Eugene's in the back somewhere. So Tom helped us out in 2018. Eugene did his final year project on otters. And Anson was an RA for a couple years. This is Sean. Sean's poking at a spraint over here. And this is John. John's a PhD student now in my lab, and he helped us a lot. And a lot of other people helped on this project. I didn't get out into the field as much as I wanted, but sometimes I made it out. So I just like these photos because they they capture us sort of in our natural habitat, just like the animals I'm going to show. All right. So you probably know the answer already because I've already shown some photos, but we did in fact find otters. But this camera trap image, can anyone find the animal? All right, I tricked you. There's no animal in there. But this is what most of our camera trap images look like. So we have tens of thousands of images over the course of our study, and most of them look like this because, you know, a leaf triggers the camera or something. It's pretty painstaking work. But when we got lucky, and sometimes we did, we get something like this. Yeah. Sean was very excited when she got this image. All right, so here's a Eurasian otter, and we're very lucky in this case. We don't have very many photos of otters during the day. We have lots of them at night, and I'll show you the otter photos at night. But this one happens to be in the day, and so it's a very nice color photo. And again, this is a nice rock face, which Sean predicted would be a good place for the otters to spraint. And so here we have an otter kind of sniffing the rock, looking to find a place. Kind of checking out the habitat, thinking maybe this is a good place to spraint. And it's sprainted. So you can see the spraint here. So I don't know if you noticed in the seminar poster, but that was in fact an otter sprainting, which is a little, if anyone was paying attention. All right, so the otter sprainted, and then it kind of looks around and decides it's done. And then 3 days later, Sean is there. Sean finds the spraint, collects the spraint, and then we can do genetic analysis, diet analysis, and a bunch of other stuff, which I'll show in a minute. So most of our otter photos are like this. They're not as catchy, but they're still great. And yeah, some of them are blurry. But they're very active animals. Oh, I like this one. This one, so here's the otter staring at us. This is Shenzhen in the background. It's pretty amazing. Don't know what it's doing, but it's having fun of some sort. All right, so we do have some video. We don't have a ton of video, but I'll show you some otter videos. And I think these really, really well capture some of their cool behaviors. Oh, no, hang on. Sorry. Doing its thing. Shake, shake, shake. Here's another one. Oh, wait, this is the same one. Sorry. This is the other one. And then I think there's one more. All right, so this is my favorite. So if everyone remains very quiet, you can actually hear the otter on this video, which is pretty cool. All right, so otters. So yeah, Sean was actually very successful. And like I said, I've not shown you the 10,000 blank images. I only showed you one of those. And it looks like there are tons of otters. They're very rare, but because we had a lot of cameras out, we did manage to find them. Oops, sorry. All right. One of the other cool things about the camera trapping is we get other animals. And so I'll show you some of these images because I think they're pretty cool. So here's a black kite. Again, Shenzhen in the background. The black kite is eating a fish. We have so many greater kukul photos. These birds, they just they walk around like they own the place, and I don't know, they really like the cameras for some reason. So many egret photos. Lots and lots of egrets. We do get leopard cats. Yeah, so leopard cat is another one of those animals that a lot of people don't see the leopard cats. They're not nearly as rare as Eurasian otter, but they're out there, and we definitely caught them on our cameras. One of the great things about the camera trap photos, you get weird angles. You capture the animals in strange behaviors. Here's a murder of collared crows, which is pretty cool. This is IUCN vulnerable species, relatively common in Maipo area. Here's a small Indian civet. Small Asian mongoose. White-throated kingfisher. We were really excited about this one. Big mammal. And the iconic black-faced spoonbill, staring right back at us. We did get some videos. This is small Indian civet. So there's two here. There's one here. But check out the one in the right side. So it's missing a foot. Seems to be okay. Seems happy enough. Don't know why it's missing a foot. But yeah, it could have been a trap. Probably a trap. And also leopard cat. All right. So those are some photos. There's some more, but those are the main photos and videos I wanted to show. So once we went out and got all that camera trap information, we got all that spraints, all those spraints, then it was a matter of getting that data together, synthesizing that data, and trying to understand something about the otters. The first thing we did was we decided to actually interview the people who live in this landscape. So there are a lot of fish farmers in the Deep Bay area, and there are also a lot of residents. And we decided that if we asked them if they had seen an otter, we might actually be able to get some good quality information. So this is known, the scientific term is local ecological knowledge, or LEK. And this turned out to be extraordinarily useful. So we interviewed 211 people, and over 40% had seen an otter, which is pretty cool. So the people who live in these areas, they've seen otters, and they know they're there. But the other interesting thing is when we asked them if they had perceived a trend over time, over 60% of the respondents reported a significant decline, which is concerning. So it suggests that the otters are in fact declining. The other interesting thing is that about 60% of them believed that otters should be protected, which was good news for us. Remember, otters eat fish. I have evidence of that in a moment. And a lot of these are fish farmers. So it's not necessarily a good thing for fish farmers to have otters eating all their fish or eating some of their fish. But actually, most of the people we interviewed were pretty supportive of otter conservation. So we felt that that was good news. The other great thing about these records is we could actually spatially locate where people had seen otters, and then we could get an actual spatial mapping of Eurasian otter. And we could get historical records based on if they had seen it in the past, and we could get current records, whether they'd seen it in the past decade. So you can see these historical records, current records. I'm going to come back to this data set in a little while, but it was a nice way of getting a kind of initial idea about the spatial distribution of otters. This is the main paper, which I'm going to talk about today. So I'm just showing the title, showing some of the co-authors, which includes Eugene and Tom and Billy. So spraints demonstrate small population size and reliance on fish ponds for Eurasian otter in Hong Kong. So all the information I'm going to show now is based on the spraints that Sean collected and got this information from. So here's the table. So 2018 and 2019 is when Sean did this intensive sampling of otter spraints. And you can see here, in total, she collected 40 fresh spraints. Now, that's not all the spraints she collected. She collected, I think, over 400 spraints in total. But to get quality genetic information, and this is microsatellite data for those of you interested, to get that quality genetic information, we needed fresh otter spraints, so in the past day or two. So we had 40 fresh spraints, and of those, we were able to genotype, so get genetic individual information for 22 of the individuals. We were then able to identify 4 individuals in 2018 and 3 individuals in 2019. What's also interesting is that of these individuals, there's no overlap. So the 4 individuals that were found in 2018, we didn't find any of them in 2019. We found 3 new individuals in 2019. So that means a total population size of 7 out of the 22 that we sampled. So in other words, we got a lot of repeat individuals. What's additionally pretty interesting is through this data, we can look at relatedness. And so we know that each of these is an individual genotype. So OT1, OT2, otter 3, otter 4, all the way to otter 7. Otter 1 and otter 2 are a parent offspring pair. Otter 3 and otter 4 are siblings. And then otter 5 and otter 6 and otter 7 are unrelated as far as we can tell. So not only is it a small population size of only 7 otters in all of Hong Kong, as far as we can tell, there are also, some of them are related. We have related pairs. So this is a really small population size. Now, of course, there are definitely more than 7 otters. We can't possibly have identified all of the otters in Hong Kong, but this is a minimum estimate. And given the fact that we had so many repeats and the fact that of those 7, we had these related pairs, it's suggestive of a very small population size in Hong Kong. All right, the other thing we were able to learn from the spraints is the diet. So this was really painstaking work. I know Tom did a lot on this. You have to go through the spraints and then pick out the scales and the bones and figure out where these came from. We had reference samples like this. So these are tilapia scales. And that required, getting dead tilapia and then imaging them and figuring that all out. But once we did all that, we could get an estimate of the proportion of the diets from these different sources. And when we did that, we found that 97%, the bulk estimate based on these spraints, comes from fish. So these are really strong fish eaters, which was not surprising, although that 97% is a lot higher than other studies on Eurasian otters. So these are very, very picky eaters in that way. But we can further break it down based on this information. 37% is tilapia, 40% is gray mullet, 10% is goldfish. We know tilapia are farmed. They're not native. So you can also find them not just in the fish farms, but also as invasive species. Gray mullet and goldfish are native. but also farmed. So what it suggests is that given that all of these species are found in the fish farms, the otters are almost certainly heavily reliant on the fish farms as a resource. We found other things. This wasn't the entirety of what we found, but I'm showing every once in a while they would grab a crustacean. And then every once in a while we had a 7% occurrence of birds. So just a couple bird instances, very, very small proportion. But mostly what they're eating is fish. All right, I'm going to go back to our interview records. So these are our interview records where we were able to find locations based on the interview records where otters persisted in gray and where otters were lost in yellow. And then what we decided to do is look at land use change over time and relate that to places where otters were lost and otters persisted. And our hypothesis was, because fish pond is such an important habitat for otters, our prediction was that in places where otters have persisted, there will be a lower level of loss of fish pond versus the place where otters have been lost. This research was actually a final year project by Jamie Fung, who was a BSc student in 2019. But Martha Ledger, Martha's here as well, who's a current postdoc in my lab, she picked up the work and kind of finished it off and created this cool analysis. So what we have here are remote sensing images. These are Landsat images, so just photos, basically satellite photos of Hong Kong. And you can see from this photo to this photo over time, there's been a huge increase in urbanization, which is obvious. And then we can use kind of classification techniques to look at changes in land use over time. And what we found was very confusing. So in places where otters were lost, you can see from 1995 to 2018, there's been an increase in fish pond area. What? Where otters have persisted, there's been no change. This really confused me when I first saw this, and this is why I love science, because it always throws curveballs at you, and you don't really know what to make of it. So we spent some time trying to figure out, what happened, why from 1995 to 2018, you would get an increase in fish pond area and you would lose otters. But fortunately, with this data set, we can actually go further back in time. Oops, sorry. And if we look at 1986, actually that loss in fish pond happened in the 90s. And so our best guess is that it was that loss in the 90s that ultimately led to a higher probability of otters being lost as well. So it's important to kind of be mindful of the different timescales that we're looking at. Eugene was really interested, as part of his research, at looking at dogs. So we have a lot of dog images on the camera traps. So we were curious whether places that had a lot of dogs might change the activities of the otters. So what we did is we looked at locations, camera trap locations where we had a lot of dogs, so that's this dotted line, and locations where there weren't so many dogs, which is the dark line. And this is just a plot of otter activity across the time of day. And so, of course, there's not a lot of otter activity during the day. We know that because we know Eurasian otter is nocturnal. But what was interesting is where there are few dogs, the peak in otter activity appears to be early morning. But when there's high dog presence, they seem to shift their activity peak to closer to the middle of the night, which makes some sense because dogs are predominantly diurnal. And so if you're an otter and you want to avoid tangling with dogs, then you might shift your activity. So this is all based on the camera trap data and was kind of an interesting use and application that Eugene led. And the last study I'll talk about was done by Jiayi Liu. Jiayi was a participant in our summer research program. So she just finished her degree at University of St. Andrews. She was a statistics student. So she came to me and said, do you have any statistics issues that I can help solve? And I said, sure. Take a crack at this camera trap data and let me know if you can estimate population size. And she said, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. So I'm not going to go through this because I'm not a statistician. But through a so-called N mixture model, which is what that was, we could actually get estimates of both otter and dog. And then we could relate those two things. So you can see here the population estimate based on this and mixture model is more like 25. But the minimum, this is the uncertainty range, the minimum is pretty close to the minimum that we got from the genetic data, so around 7 or 10. Dogs are much more abundant, so there are a lot of dogs in the area, and so you can see the estimate of dogs here. And it's hard to tell from this data set, but we did find that there was a negative association between dogs and otters. So basically, when dog populations increased, we also found a decrease in the otter population. And so again, this was consistent with what Eugene found in terms of activity time. It's consistent with other studies on otters elsewhere. Dogs are certainly a concern when it comes to these animals. So to summarize our otter research to date, the first thing is that this is definitely a small population size. It's a minimum of 7. We know it's more than 7, but probably not a lot more. The diet is very much fish dominated. And as a consequence, we find that the otters are reliant on fish ponds. They're reliant on other habitats as well, and that came out in some of our remote sensing analysis. So it's not just that they need fish ponds, but certainly fish ponds are an important habitat for the species. And then finally, we have some evidence, we're still working on some of this work, but that we have some evidence that dogs are affecting the behavior and probably the population of otters in Hong Kong. So that brings us to chapter 4, the future of otters in Hong Kong. So we have not been doing much monitoring since 2022 here at HKU, but fortunately other researchers in Hong Kong have been studying otters. So this is the donation page for WWF Hong Kong. I should state I'm on the board of trustees for WWF Hong Kong, so I'm not an independent advocate. But if you do want to donate money, feel free to become an otter protector. But the reason why I actually showed this is from the donation page for WWF Hong Kong, and you can see the text on the bottom. The Maipo and Inner Deep Bay wetlands are home to Eurasian otter. A recent study only found 7 otters in Hong Kong, suggesting that only a tiny population is left. So they're using our study to get money. Like I said, I'm not an independent. Anyway. Kaduri Farm and Botanic Garden has also been doing a lot of monitoring. So this is just a quote from their research page. So in 2020, they launched an otter study in Hong Kong, aiming to uncover otter spatial and temporal changes. And they're partnering with WWF Hong Kong to conduct long-term monitoring and the research of otters at Maipo Nature Reserve. So again, this is a picture from Kaduri Farm where they're collecting spraints and doing work that's similar to Sean's. And also, we can then kind of connect these studies and hopefully figure out what's happening more long-term in terms of the Hong Kong otters. Now, there was a recent discovery, which some of you might have seen, and that is otters have been discovered. This happened just a couple months ago in Brothers Marine Park near Lantau. So this is a new record, pretty amazing. This is the spraint that they found and confirmed genetically that it's Eurasian otter. So this significantly extends the distribution of Eurasian otter in Hong Kong. So this is a recent records. Remember, 1962, there was nothing over here. So this is pretty exciting that they've either been there and we didn't know, or they're expanding the distribution to this area. Also interesting of note, you can see from this map, they're using the fish farmer interviews that I showed you before. That's how we know that otters were kind of more broadly distributed in this part of the Hong Kong. So there is ongoing research, and this is, I think, really important and necessary for ensuring that we are able to conserve otters. Now, one of the things that kind of well, how do I put it? In 2021, when Hong Kong government announced the Northern Metropolis Plan, I was my first thought was, oh no, what about the otters? Um, I mean, I'm an ecologist, so of course, that's the kind of thing I think. For those of you who don't know about the Northern Metropolis, probably most of you, but this is a planned development in Hong Kong that will ultimately lead to a population size of 2.5 million, lead to the development of innovation and technology centers, create 650,000 jobs, and also establishment of wetland conservation parks. So my first kind of impression was, oh, what does this mean for the otters? My second thought was, well, I mean, I'm a scientist, right? So I'm really excited about the kind of innovation and technology part of this. I recognize the importance for our economy and development in Hong Kong and housing and all these other things. But I'm still worried about the otters and the other biodiversity in this region. So what does that mean for the otters? So we immediately realized the implications. So this is from the paper that we published. This is our kind of estimate of the core area of Hong Kong otters. This is not the only place. We do find them in other parts of this area. But this is really the core. This is where we find kind of the highest abundance and density of otters. And you can see these dashed lines. These are the proposed plans for the Northern Metropolis. These are the urban areas as part of the development. So you can see it has the potential to really squeeze those otters into these little areas. And as part of the development, there is a plan to establish these wetland conservation parks, and that could have a huge value, of course, for the otters. But we still have to mitigate all of the other external impacts that are brought with these developments. One thing that comes to mind immediately, given everything I've just said, is dogs, right? So it does make our job a little bit harder as ecologists to manage these natural habitats when we have these urban developments. One way we can mitigate that is through the environmental impact assessment process. And so this is from the environmental impact assessment of Sa Tin Lok Ma Chau. And the quote from the environmental impact assessment is: a recent study on the population size of otter in Hong Kong revealed that the Eurasian otter overlapped with the assessment area, and spraints of one individual were identified in Hu Hoc Wai, Sam Po Shu, and also a mangrove in Mai Po. And I'm showing the map here. So this is from our paper. This is the individual they're referring to. So these yellow circles, that's one individual, and that's in 1 year. That's 2019. And we know that from the spraints. So we know this one individual was moving. It was using this entire area. So these things are really mobile. They move around. And so when we're thinking about development, we have to be mindful of that connectivity. We have to make sure that the otters can move around if we want to actually maintain these populations. A few months ago, the government set up the environmental committee for the Sa Tin Technopole. So this committee was set up by Civil Engineering Development Department, held this meeting in November to give advice, views, and the plans for ecological mitigation and enhancement measures for this particular project. And so there are a lot of ecologists, including otter experts. And I have some hope in this regard, because it's Sean's research and the research that we've been doing on otters is being considered in these development plans. And hopefully, if ecologists can be a part of this process, then the development can proceed in a way that Hong Kong's can persist. All right, so to sum up, thinking about kind of science and the future of Hong Kong otters. So what Hong Kong's otters are facing is not unique globally. And this is one of the reasons why I'm drawn to this research. You see this all over the world. It's not just otters. It's not just in Hong Kong. We're in a decade and a century of urbanization. And so a lot of species are facing these kinds of challenges. And so hopefully, if we can figure out a way to conserve the otters of Hong Kong, then we can also inform other urbanization development projects similarly. That's what I just said. One of the things which I think is really important in this research is that basic ecological information is really important for proper environmental management. In some of the work we do in certainly academic science, sometimes you get these questions like, well, who really cares about how many otters there are in Hong Kong? I don't think that, but one of the reasons why we care is it's really important in terms of informing environmental management. So we can guarantee a future for Hong Kong otters. I truly, truly, truly believe that. And I actually personally believe we need to. And so I can't impose my values on you or anyone else. So that's a decision that we all have to make on our own. But if we do want to guarantee a future for Hong Kong's otters, we have to be smart about it. We have to maintain ecological connectivity. We have to manage the habitats properly. And yeah, we have to be smart about it. The final thing I want to mention is, again, this is all thanks to Sean. So when Sean started her PhD with me, she would come into my office, and for those of you who know Sean, you'll know what I mean. She'd come to my office and she'd, Tim, we really need this data. We need all the data. The data is really important, and if we don't have the data, then government can't make proper decisions. And I just like, all right. I mean, maybe it's important, but I don't know how important it is. And maybe years from now it'll be used, but her thesis really does matter, and it mattered immediately, right? When we started this research, we didn't know about the Northern Metropolis. We didn't know about any of this stuff. And then boom, it became really important really quickly. And so one of the lessons that I learned from this, I was technically Sean's advisor, but Sean taught me so much. And one of the things she taught me was how quickly the research we can do as ecologists can be really critical for development, for Hong Kong, and for biodiversity. And the final thing I mentioned, I've been talking a lot about Sean, but actually a lot of people contributed to this research. A lot of students, research assistants, postdocs. We had a ton of field and lab help. There was so much field and lab work. It's hard to describe how many hours went into this research. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions. All right, so the chorus. It's a very simple chorus. All right, so few otters in Hong Kong waters, abundant they ain't, we know from the spraint. All right, so the song is called Abundant They Ain't. And you'll hear the pre-chorus. There's no words to the pre-chorus. It's like that. It's very simple. And then we get to the chorus. So few waters and Hong Kong waters, abundant they ain't, we know from the springs. All right, you guys got it. All right, let's see. And my lyric sheet, because I'm trying to remember the lyrics. All right. Swimming all across the greater bay, our musculine friends and family Lutrine, eating all the fish in the ponds of Mapo, secretive, nocturnal, they're always on the go. Amidst all their sprains saw so many fish scales, the data collected they reveal many tales. Every now and then otters might come across a bird. We made this discovery by sifting through a turd. From the spraint. When dogs are around, otters shift into the night.
Such temporal partitioning may avoid a future fight.
Leopard, cats, and civets,
Mongoose and egrets. So much fieldwork, but we have no regrets.
So few otters in Hong Kong waters, abundant they ate, we know from the strain. So few otters in Hong Kong waters, abundant they ate, we know from the strain.
We can also use mixture models to population size, probably more than 7, maybe 25. Either way, we know numbers are quite small. With northern net coming, we need to protect them all.
One more time. So